Marv, I know you picked an interesting one.
Oh,
I listened to a couple of tracks and, well,
I'll take it away then, kid. Oh, lovely. So I did an album which gets celebrated a lot, and this is now, I'll think of words. Usually, you know, a couple of times you might come up with an album that you're there like, I like this one, but it gets trashed, or you're there like, I don't know why it gets trashed because I like it. It's one of those kind of things. Unless I just said the same thing twice. But basically, I'm doing Awe by Skip Spence, released May 19th, 1969. So weirdly enough, we both picked albums of the same year. Yep. It keeps happening. Another album made by someone at 23 years old. I thought that was quite interesting with the old Lauryn Hill thing, but it's the only studio album from Skip Spence. Now, he was involved in a number of bands prior. He was the drummer in Jefferson Airplane's debut, and he was the guitarist and singer in Moby Grape.
Yeah, didn't know that.
So I first read about this in a classic rock article that was called like One Hit Wonders.
Okay.
And it was praised, and they're like, yeah, it's a crazy psychedelia, folky country album. And you really need to, like, it's like, you know, you have to listen to it before you die, those kind of things. And the image of Spence with a very overgrown Beatles haircut, eyes that are just like this, and you're thinking, this man is interesting,
yeah,
say the least. Now, second year uni, I used to live in Staple Hill in Bristol. It's a very nice house. My mate James Dorr used to come down on like our off days at uni, and we used to write. So what we used to do is we used to meet up in the morning, we'd put on an album, listen to it, and then we'd go up into my little room and then we'd write all day. So, you know, we do Super Unknown, Soundgarden, some St. Vincent stuff, Marry Me, all that things. And I was like, you know what? This article I had in front of me on my little binder, I was there like, apparently this is a banger, so let's put it on. So we slot it on, right? Because it's meant to be a classic album. And with each song, I was just like, okay, next one. God, have I put the right? Yeah, it's the same album. Yeah, same songs. Okay. I was like, what is this shit? How is this a classic? Have classic rock actually listened to this? Like, what's going on? I don't understand why it was popular, why it's celebrated. It's awful. Yeah. I couldn't remember any songs off of it. Was not impressed by any of the guitar playing, any of the melodies, like lack of melodies, if you can even call it that. We were just kind of annoyed that we wasted our time. It's very, very weird. I was just like, this is crap. Which really, in a sense, planted the seed of like, can I even trust articles and reviews? And every Metallica song ranked from worst to best. And you're like, is it though? Is it though? So yeah, then we went upstairs and made sweet, sweet music together. It's definitely not from Awe. So there you go. So that was 2015 until now. I've never listened to it ever again. That was the one time all the way through. And I was like, we're doing this reason, because they've only got one album. And I was like, it has to be this one. It has to be this one. It's been filed in my brain as like a no need to revisit album. You know, those kind of ones where you're just like, I've heard it. There's nothing I've gleaned from it. I've got all the nutritional value that I need from it. And cool. Maybe if it comes on skip or shuffle or something like that, maybe. But yeah, exactly. I got a fair few albums like that. But yes, I wasn't looking forward to listening to this. I think a huge part of it was knowing that I didn't have any other albums to kind of bounce this one off of. I couldn't hear how like he had progressed, you know, diversified or stretched his kind of output. Like if I could listen to, let's say he had 8 albums and this was his first one. If I could listen to say like 2 or 3 from his like 80s period or something, then someone's like, yeah, they're great. You like, if you go back, he started off with this kind of guy, and then he's progressed further. Like his best album is his 4th one, but go back to this and you could hear the lineage. At least that would take some of the edge off of like, okay, I'm not the biggest fan of this one, but you start to kind of like it more in time and you can see where it's going. But this is like watching a pilot episode and you've only got the pilot. I've read up on Skip Spence's life before I re-listened to Awe, and realized the context that this album sits in. But it still didn't change my mind going into this. I was still like, I really don't want to do this. I had like haunting flashbacks to that living room and just being like, oh, what's going on? Like, basically, I can just remember like, that's what the melodies and the lyrics and the sound of his voice sounded like in my head, with very, very basic out of tune guitar playing. I've had 6 years of new music planted into my brain, you know, a whole bunch of life experiences, gigs, podcast episodes in the bag. So, you know, I think I can do this. So let's dive into kind of the background of his music career. He got the gig as the drummer of Jefferson Airplane, right? He met a band member called Marty Balin at a bar. Now, Skip Spence has never played drums in his life at this point. And Marty Balin goes, here are some drumsticks. We're recording in a week, so can you be our drummer? And he's like, I don't drum. He's like, don't care, not my shift. So, you know, Skip Spence goes away for a week, comes back, and the drumming you hear is just amazing. You would never know this guy has been playing drums for a week. It just sounds very professional. There's really inventive feels. It's very solid. It's just mind-blowing that I was listening to it, knowing that he'd only been playing drums a week, and I was like, this is absolutely insane.
That's
like,
mental.
I'm not saying Neil Peart levels of like drumming, like virtuoso, but just to know that he's had a week of drumming experience, and that was the outcome of it. Like the Shags, like I don't know how long they had to practice and learn their instruments, but you just kind of think, wow, this, for people who have probably had a limited amount of time, they've actually made a whole album of songs.
One day, Marv, they recorded that album.
Madness.
And I'm not getting emotional. I've got a cold. It is emotional, though.
It's emotional to have a cold. I mean,
the Shags managed to do all that in one day. It's amazing, isn't it?
Just blows your mind, doesn't it? Eh? He then got fired after missing a gig because he went to go party with some girls in Mexico. So, rock star.
I could forgive that.
The last band he was in before releasing Ore was Moby Grape. Now, he got fired after trying to kill his bandmate, Don Stevenson, believing he was the Antichrist. He axed his hotel room, but unfortunately he got restrained and arrested. Now, he was high on LSD, so yeah.
Yeah, it says it all, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, it kind of says it all. He was spending most of his time with a self-proclaimed witch called Joanna, a groupie that got in drugs, most notably as one called Blue Cheer. Now,
are you talking about the band or the drug?
The drug, Blue Cheer.
Okay.
Do you like Blue Cheer? Quick aside.
Oh, I love Blue Cheer.
Yeah?
I love them. Great.
Blue Cheer was apparently LSD and methadone. Now, not the best combination of drugs for your brain to be functioning on.
Not ideally.
Apparently, one day he'd be looking good, and then the next he'd be all sweaty and looking like he shaved half his beard off with an axe. So, what's up with this bloke and axes? He just loves axes. Can't get a bloody enough of them. It'd be easy to buy for like Christmas and birthday. You're right, mate. Got another fire axe for your collection, mate. Cheers, mate. So after being admitted to Bellevue Hospital, the story goes on the day of his discharge, he drove a motorcycle up to Nashville in his pajamas, bashed out Ore in a week. Now, his wife claims this not to be true, so a more nuanced account goes like this. After his discharge, the producer called David Rubinson, who'd helped to get Moby Grape their record deal, picked him up, bought him some food and some new clothes, got him a hotel. Now, Spence said that he had new songs he wanted to record and wanted to get them down as soon as possible, due to being deprived of a guitar at the hospital. So, he's composed 30 songs in his head without an instrument, and he's there like, I need to record them before I forget them before I just kind of they go. So never mind that fact. That's amazing that he's managed to remember all of these songs individually. He's planned out all the chords, planned out what he's going to do without a guitar. So he was given an advance, bought a motorcycle, and then made the 900-mile trip to Columbia Studios in Nashville. The only instruction given to the engineer who was over there, called Mike Figlio, was just keep the tape running. So in 6 days, he recorded 30 songs. Bearing in mind, I'm assuming when he got to the studio, that was the only time he actually started playing them on instruments. he also played every single instrument on the record. So not only is he having to try and compose the songs on guitar and vocals, he's then got to record each instrument individually and then try and make it sound like a band and all these things. So that's already mind-blowing in itself. I'm starting to put my interest up a little bit more now.
Yeah.
A little bit more now.
Yeah.
After finishing up the recording, he simply went 900 miles back home and spent time with the wife and kids. That was it. No touring, no promotion. Apparently originally intended as just demos, but Rubinson, who was the producer who got him the advance, was so impressed that he released it as a full album. So you could make the kind of connection there that the Shags said, we're not happy with what the songs on the album, they're not the ones that we wanted out, all these out of time ones. Maybe Skip Spence didn't want these songs out, they're just demos. What did you think of the songs that you heard off this album? What's your opinion?
There wasn't a lot that piqued my interest in it. It seemed quite tame, you know, it seemed quite, you know, relatively okay. It sounded good from what I heard. There sounded a bit much of some songs.
Yeah.
Like you could have cut that, but you know, knowing what you've just said, it's quite incredible to think that he remembered all that without touching an instrument, unless he was lying, or on LSD, or on blue cheer,
or three of them,
or trying to kill someone with an axe. I mean, yeah, it's very interesting when you describe it like that, how he just remembered all that. I didn't think it was bad. It wasn't offensive as such, but I feel like maybe I think I need to give it another listen, because I feel like the story behind it seemed, from what I heard, to be more interesting than the actual musical content itself.
I think 1,000%, yeah. 1,000%.
Yeah, no, it's I wouldn't call it boring. I wouldn't call it dull, because music isn't boring or dull. But it, yeah, you know, compared to the but you know, there's heart and spirit in the Shags, and there's a lot of like up and downness. Whereas I feel like what I heard of Old Boy, it's not that it's the reverse of it as such, but it's a lot more tame in its nature. Yeah.
You make a good point, and I think I can inject a bit more of, I guess, context around that, and it might make sense.
Yeah.
Why the songs might sound quite dull and introspective. So we start with Little Hands. It's one of the more memorable melodies here. It's very 60s in its chord progressions. Now, people who are not musos, when I say very 60s in its chord progressions, what it usually means is they're playing in the Mixolydian mode. Now, all this means is that you've got all your notes in the major scale in a nice little formula each time, and you're changing the 7th degree of that. You're putting it down a half step. So what happens here is you just get a nice sound that you can kind of play. It brings in like a sad minor kind of quality to the music, but overall sounds happy. So it's like having a little drop of soy sauce in a nice fresh 7-Up. It's like you can drink it. It isn't going to ruin the whole drink, but there is something there where you're like, something's fishy about this drink. I'm like, Merritt, have you put soy sauce in my drink? And he's like, I've done that, but listen to Shag, bloody shagging and the wagon shagging. So I have to believe him. And then before you know it, I'm drinking soy sauce out the bottle with a little drops of 7-Up because I'm just addicted, and it's his fault.
That was an excellent description of the Mixolydian mode.
There you go. See? So can you do any better? Don't think so. So I'm moving on.
Yeah, go.
It's got nice harmonies. It's a very cohesive band feel. Again, amazing because it's one person recording it. The dynamics of the song rises very organically. It's probably the most single-friendly song. It also gives you the best of the styles of songs we get here. So usually we get country-sounding songs and 60s psychedelia rock. This is a perfect meld of the two. Now, what happens is you either get country songs or psychedelia rock. So if you're a fan of both, good. If you're only a fan of one of them, a bit mix and match for this album. But Cripple Creek hits with the former of the two styles, so country. Spence delivering his words in a low baritone delivery, sounding more like in his 40s and 50s than a man of like 23. Sneaky syncopated drum groove helps propel this tune from being too sleepy sounding. Now, that's my main gripe with this album, is a lot of those country-esque songs, they're just too slow, they're too plodding, and you get boom, 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 boom. There you go. But sing that an octave down. Can you sing it and another octave down? There we go. Now we've got Skip Spences all. They give me kind of a Nick Drake vibe. So again, this is where I could kind of sway you. It's very insular and very claustrophobic in its sound. And I think that's what gets mistaken for it's a bit dull, it's a bit boring. Yeah. Really what you got to think is, okay, the instruction was to the engineer, leave the tape running. It was literally the engineer and him. And this Skip Spence guy is just going around, plays drums, plays guitar, plays bass, puts in percussion, all these things, sings it. It's just him on his own, literally doing these songs, filtering them all out in his brain. So you can make this argument that, like, of course it's insular and claustrophobic because you're inside his brain listening to him just pour out these songs. And you're just kind of brought into his world, much like the Shags one. You're brought into this unique world of, I've never heard anything like this. And then you go read up more and you're like, oh, literally they were like, shut in, just go learn stuff, go write songs, then put in the studio for one day. So you're hearing this just one day of them recording. And the Skip Spence one has a similar thing. It's just that maybe, I mean, I'd say it's unique sounding for sure, but I think maybe next to the Shags, it's not as striking. That's the thing I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Diana really gives us this very insular and claustrophobic kind of sound. Has a spicy chord change in it, which always tickles my theory brain. Love to hear it. It was like, ooh, give me more, daddy. Ooh. And then a spooky electric guitar on the left channel. There's a funny bit in the acoustic guitar solo. So it's very kind of standard chords with this one spicy chord in. So when they go to the spicy chords, the solo starts to kind of meander, and you can kind of hear that he's just like going up notes in the hopes that it kind of just fits over it. And then, nice. And then he gets to like a note, and then he kind of ends it with like a guitar scratch. So basically he's muted all the strings. There's no notes, and just kind of goes almost like a finite, like, oh, I've just got through that. Cool. No one's going to know. They ain't going to hear that. Margaret Tiger Rug. So yes, this is a very much a ba-dum bum bum song. It's an odd song indeed, talking about feeding a tiger and with a vocal melody that is erratic and without thought. It's close to what might have been going through his head on those Blue Cheer trips. And without pause, we get thrown to the tune Weighted Down, the prison song. To be honest, it's quite boring. It's plodding, country song that kind of out of tune. It represents what I remember the whole album sounding like about 6 years ago. So for me, Weighted Down, the prison song is the worst for me. It's just like, yeah, okay, I wouldn't show someone that to try and sell the album, but if I wanted to not sell the album, I would play him that. I can hear shades of Jay Mascis vocals from Dinosaur Jr. in this song. That low, slightly nasally tone that I'm not like against. I think nasally tone is completely fine. And it's also 6 minutes long. So I don't know whether this was the one that you kind of heard, but it was like, I want this to be over now. Maybe all of them sounded like that to you. Those kind of sad country ones. You're just like, this all sounds the same. Please stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
War and Peace comes in from the right speaker into stereo and brings along with it the most psychedelic moment from Awe. Spence is now in his high vocal register, a complete contrast from the previous track, and the satisfying resolution from the first section of the second is just wonderful to hear. We also get a strong and confident electric guitar solo, that nice broken up 60s tone where they hadn't really invented distortion or overdrive. It was all about turning up your amplifier as loud as you can, and it would just break up. So it has that really nice sound to it, you know what I mean? Spiky is what I like to call it. And then we get another solo in the left channel. It's kind of an extra serving of dessert. A bit of afters, you might say. And as a cheeky outro nod, he starts playing the riff to Sunshine of Your Love. And I'm just like, go on, boy. it really makes me crave an album full of those types of songs. I really wish that it was just psychedelia rock all the way through. Now, I mean, we have Moby Grape, which he contributed a lot to. So if you go back in his career, you got that. Jefferson Airplane debut, very psychedelic. So, you know, I can go back and listen to that, but if I just want just pure Skip Spence, and maybe if he did another album, I'd like to just hear those rather than the country songs. But not to say I don't like the country songs, just some of them are a bit plodding. And like I said all the time, plodding and slow. Broken Heart takes us right back to country sounding, low vocal song. This one doesn't plod, rather it keeps a jaunty tempo, so I'm already in favor of it, along with a melody and tricks that hold up and has strength. And this is also a great example of forgetting that he played all the instruments by himself, because it was just so well put together. So Mez, let's talk about layering and overdubbing for a second. Now, you know, you look at the first Foo Fighters album, that's the first one I think of, and Skip Spence's Or, knowing that it's one person playing all the instruments, and then you forget that it sounds like a whole band playing live. I think that, again, people who either play, I would say that people who don't play, so non-musician people just listen to music and love it. Maybe at a push, like guitar players or even like singers. I would say maybe those two people. Or maybe just all musicians in general that just play one instrument. Maybe don't understand fully how insanely hard and amazing that is, that someone can play every single instrument and for it to sound like a band. Now, I'm talking about on analog gear, on acoustic instruments, rather than sitting at a workstation and you've got grids and the computer helps you keep everything in time and in tune. And even when you're playing stuff in, recording it, and you might be out of rhythm, the computer will just assign it to a certain rhythmic note, and you're all good. But I'm talking if I gave you a simple 4-track recorder where you had no correctional devices, and you had to play drums, bass, guitar, and sing. That's mad. That's like so genius. So based on your experiences of layering and overdubbing, what do you kind of take from this? How does that add into maybe the positives from this album, regardless if you don't like the songs, the actual act of making them?
Well, it's absolutely crazy that he managed to do that and make it sound like a band. There's a lot to be said for a natural feel on a studio track when there is not, you know, it's being dubbed or there's layers, you know. Let's take the theme for 50 Ways podcast, for example. That was a happy mistake. I had an idea of what I wanted to do. In terms of layering, though, I mean, even if you yourself are a very consistent player, knowing exactly where to stop, exactly where to start notes, because there's a level where it's like, yeah, just bash it out, that's fine. Nowadays, we have clicks and things like that. And we have gridding, as you mentioned, you can move stuff around. Take all that back to 1969. No gridding, no editing technology, no, you know, you could do it again, but eventually you're going to run out of things, you know what I mean? You're going to run out of tape.
Yeah.
Where you've layered all these things on top of each other, you make a mistake at that point, you're starting again. I could do 100 guitar tracks if I wanted. I could do 1,000.
Yeah. And
I could link them all up and do what I wanted with it. And that's crazy. But that's the technology we have on offer now. That's how a lot of things are made. And it comes with its restrictions based on how much possibility there is. What do you want to do? Where's your oyster? But yeah, back then, that would have been very difficult.
The same with the Shags. Even just the act of making music, regardless of the outcome, is still fascinating, and it's always unique. Everybody's music is different in the way they approach it, the way their skin is, their bones, what they've eaten. So many different factors. So the same as a lot of things in life, you know, like especially like sports stars and things, like people's, I don't know, serves in tennis are all going to be slightly different. No one's got like they might use the same kind of maybe technique, but everything is distance, everything is different. But yeah, it also doesn't mean that just because that's a fact, it doesn't mean that stuff is automatically good. It also means that, you know, doesn't mean that nothing is automatically bad. That's just a fact going into it.
Yeah.
It's still fascinating for me. I think the fact that he had them all in his head, then went and, you know, probably experimented a bit, but like, and was, you know, brain was probably limited maybe from all the drug use he was ingesting. To just imagine, I would love to see him in the studio just doing that, just going back and forth, figuring things out, playing drums, like madness.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
There you go. So one I really like is called Books of Moses. His vocal delivery is more gravelly and spooky than the previous songs. The acoustic guitar, it's played in like D. It's like the D major shape. I think it's down like half a tone or something. So like it might be in like C sharp standard or C standard. So it sounds really low. But whenever everyone plays, I mean, I'll play you the chord. But so when people play stuff like that, that kind of style of acoustic guitar strumming always reminds me of the desert.
It is sort of old west kind of, you know what I mean? Like the Wild West, like a cowboy strumming.
Yeah, exactly. And I something about me really likes the sound of the guitar, especially acoustic guitar in that area. There's a lot of like, I think Out on the Western Highway by Rory Gallagher. Love that sound. My Friends, Red Hot Chili Peppers, love that sound, all playing in that D kind of shape. Very bluesy. Rain and Thunder sounds as well, along with hammering a low tom hit drenched in reverb. Oh no, along with hammering, like an actual hammer, and low tom hits. And there's even like a wolf howl at the end. So go on, boy. I'm down for it. It's just a little short is all. Get another country song, Dixie Peach Promenade, Yin for Yang. Tempo is fast enough to tolerate. Kind of, you know, exactly the same stuff. Lawrence of Euphoria, very weird ditty. He's playing with rhyming words. It's kind of like Shag stuff. It's just almost childish. His voice strains at points. Before you know it, the song is done. This one feels the most like a demo, I must say. And then we get to the album closer now. Grey Afro. It's 9 minutes of drony psychedelia. It's the most rhythmic track presented here. Weirdly enough, it doesn't outstay its welcome versus like the country songs that are just, they might be a couple of minutes long, but I'm just completely bored of them. It's just very, very strange. But the interplay between the instruments is just incredible, considering he must have like done the bass and the vocals maybe at the same time. Then he overdubbed the drums on the top. It's great to hear the speeding up and down when he locks the instruments in together. It's great to hear his variations on the drums. They're very melodic. And you can tell he thinks about the song rather than the instrument part. And that's a huge thing as well. So yes, like being a singer-songwriter, rather than just being like, I'm going to play all these licks and fills and things, it just lacks a bit of soul. But very, very cool to hear. Very unique kind of drum style. No promotion, no touring, nothing. At the time, it was the lowest selling album of Columbia's history. Less than 1,000 copies sold.
That's insane.
And within a year, it was deleted from their library. So it wasn't really until his death in 1999 the impact of Awe on other artists started to come out. Robert Plant recorded Little Hands for a solo album. Mark Lanegan from Screaming Trees and Queens of the Stone Age praised it for the way it was cohesive yet all over the place at the same time. And to me, that's a perfect description of that album. And it got a tribute album, and he heard it, I think literally maybe like a day before he died. His son played it to him. He's like, yeah, literally within hours or something, he died. He was homeless and struggled with drugs and alcoholism a lot after Awe, up until his death, so a good 30 years. So yeah, listening again, it's like I haven't heard these songs before. That's what freaked me out. If you were to ask me to play and sing a song from Awe a few days after my first listen 6 years ago, I would have sung some monotonous melody with some basic open chords, really exaggerating the boringness of it all. It seems like the song Weighted Down, the Prison Song, was the only one that had any effect on me, because that would be closest to my impression. Just very slow, boring country song. It kind of freaked me out because I was like, it made me wonder what other albums I've only given a few listens to, and whether I'd have the same experience of, wow, this is definitely not what I remembered it being all that time ago. Could it just be from the artist that I only know them through like a one album lens, regardless of their other output? Or would it be the same thing happen from an artist that I know their entire catalog, and I go, you know what? I mean, Chili's, let's look at Chili's. I'm like, okay, let me listen to One Hot Minute again, you know, or let me listen to Freaky Styley again. And I'm like, oh, I actually thought I knew this one inside and out, but it's completely different to what I remember it. Would it always improve like Or would it expose the bad side of it? There's been a few times where you've listened to an album and you've gone, you know what though? I actually like this album. I don't hate it. And I'm exactly the same now. I'm like, I actually like this album now. It's been featured in like, you know, the best one album wonders of all time, and all these things always get celebrated. And I was always just like, no, it's crap. But now I've completely changed my mind on it, where I don't have to defend why it's bad because people know it's good. I'm the one that's had to go, oh, I now get the reason why it's good. I went from Or being a one-time thing to now taking it on a few spins and actually listening to it rather than trying to critique it as it was playing. It's like going out with a person from your past again, realizing that the way you knew them as, perhaps like, you know, the one who was annoying in the nightclub and spilt most of their drink on me while I waited for my 7 quid beer, was actually a sweetheart. And when you discuss that night, you find out that you were the one who had already spilt a pint over yourself beforehand, and that they only spilt their drink because you tried to do something funny like the worm and then kicked your drink into them, and like, you know, all hell breaks loose. So, you know, on your date, like 6 years later, when you've rekindled stuff and you apologize for your younger self, you know, they accept it and understand it. And you kind of go, yeah, I get the core of who you are actually, rather than this kind of thing of like, you were that idiot from so-and-so. Or to put it more plainly, you probably have people in your past who are like, oh, he was a knobhead because this one time he did this. But then a decade might go by, or 5 years might go by. You might meet up and you go, I've got the wrong opinion of you, dude, this whole time. You're actually a great guy. And Or to me now sits alongside albums of like Syd Barrett, John Frusciante, solo albums. Those were the first couple. Those introverted and pained works from one artist, underappreciated and dismissed at the time of the release, using primitive equipment, as raw and unfiltered as they could be. That's what I like about these songs. And you compare it to the Shags, like they're just, if they're meant to be demos, they're so raw and unfiltered and from his head that like they're the closest you're going to get to what the inside of his mind was like at the time. Yeah. So that's why it was dull and boring and introspective and just very closed off, because he was just shielding himself with drugs and just in that little recording studio by himself, 900 miles from home. Like it's just perfect. Like the album sounds like that, much like how the Shags sounds like the story. Most people go through their life like never living out who they really are. They may always be like a style or fashion you want to wear, music you want to proudly admit to loving, places you want to go, passions you want to seek out, like all these things that you just, you know, you might get to the end of your life, but I really wish I did that, you know, the whole regrets thing. You never do. Whether social pressure, just the weight of the world being too much. Step back and realize, and again, this is the medium of music here we're talking about, that albums like this exist then and albums like this exist now is truly humbling and pleasurably feeling. That there are artists in the world that give you all of themselves and that you can use that to free yourself. In Skip Spence's case, he's not even worrying about, okay, this is going to be a sad album, this song is a sad one, this one's this, and I'm really going to show my side of it. He's just being himself. He's just playing it, and if it releases it, fine. He doesn't care about that. And again, with the same with the John Frusciante first 2 records, it's like, I'm just playing these songs for me. This is how I am at this time. They're not aware of that to then push it out to people. People get invited into that. And if you really think about it, like, let's go to old Chad Kroeger, right? We know him from Nickelback, right? It's like, do you really feel like you actually know him intimately through his music?
No.
I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you what his favorite drink is, or what he actually is as a person.
Coca-Cola.
Roller coaster. So as much as, you know, we don't know, let's say Skip Spence, Sid Barrett, and John Frusciante, we don't even know these people. Like, we only know their celebrity persona and what they give to us. You're never going to truly know what someone's like. But I mean, they've given us a really realistic view of what they were at certain times in their life, like we did with the John Frusciante one, where it's like, you know, he's literally dying of drugs on the brink of death, and you can just hear that so much. And Skip Spence has given us that, maybe not as an intense version, you know, like we said with the Shags, with the out of tune, out of time stuff. That's a very extreme version of it. This one's a more nuanced one because he's a great musician and can play, and I think that masks maybe the extremities that he was going through, maybe the hectic lifestyle he had, like literally being locked up in a mental hospital or a general hospital and then coming out and driving 900 miles to do it. So I think this is a really good example of, you need to know the history behind it to then hear this album, and it makes a lot of sense, and it really did for me too. So I would really recommend this album as a listen. He lived with a witch and she supplied him drugs, and then he tried to murder his bandmates with an axe. So take of that what you will.